It was the summer right after I graduated from high school. A good friend and I decided to try our hand at camping. We grew up in the greater Los Angeles area, so our knowledge of the great outdoors was nothing beyond the couple of years we had in Cub Scouts of America, which was when we were in elementary school. In other words, we had almost no idea what we were doing. We packed a tent, a couple sleeping bags, supplies, etc., and headed off in his car. Note well that I grew up in the 80s, so this is a time before the wide prevalence of cell phones and the existence of other portable digital devices. We drove north on the 395 for about 6 hours and then headed westward into the mountains in the area of Inyo Canyon. First mistake. We didn't plan on which place to camp. We played it by ear, i.e., like fools. Second mistake. We left in mid-afternoon. It was pitch black darkness when we arrived in the general area. We had driven off the main road and onto a dirt road in order to find a spot to camp. The dust from driving on the dirt road overwhelmed the high beams when we finally decided to pull over and set up camp. It was around 23:30 around that time, and we were exhausted and famished. Any place was a good spot to camp for us, given our only reason to do so at that point was for our hunger and exhaustion. Third mistake. We didn't bring flashlights. We only had big lighters for our cigarettes. We tried to set up the tent using our lighters in the headlights of the car, which was parked about 10 to 15 feet away. The wind was blowing, so the lighter constantly went out after a few seconds, either directly because of the wind or indirectly because of the wind, because it would push the flame into our thumbs. Clearly, we were being complete idiots. We finished setting up the camp, but at that point, I was too tired to eat. My friend managed to make some ramen, though. We smoked a cigarette in the car, then crashed out in the tent. We awoke to a very cold morning. It must have been around 5:30. Immediately upon exiting the tent, we realized that we camped at the entrance of a hiking trail. There were at least 2 no camping signs in the visible distance from us. We dismantled the tent, cleaned up, and cleared out. That morning, we ended up buying some cheap flashlights and a nice hot meal in a very small town. It wasn't really a town, but more like a few storefronts and shops on a main road, about the length of an average city block. We went into some office, though I don't recall exactly what it was. It might have been a park ranger station or the office headquarters for a campground. In any case, we found and reserved a site for the night. The campground was basically like a large circle with campsites along its outer circumference, which each campsite being about 50 yards from its neighbor. In the middle of the circle was a common bathroom and shower. We circled around it once, and I think we saw one family that was all set up with a tent and camper. After we found our spot and set up camp, which was quite far from them. That night was when we had a creepy encounter. My friend and I were laying in the tent, shining our flashlights upward and chatting. Our new flashlights eventually gave out. Yes, broken. Our fire pit was about 6 feet away from the opening of our tent, and it was just a glowing ember. We probably should have completely put it out, and we probably shouldn't have had the tent so close. In any case, we were there, chatting away and having a good time. My friend began to be distracted with his foot. After the 3rd or 4th time he got up to check his foot, I asked him what was wrong. He told me that something is tapping his foot from the outside of the tent. His foot was against the inside of the tent, so from the outside you would have been able to see a bulge in the tent side where his foot was. It was as if petals were being thrown at his foot through the tent. There it is again, what the hell? Each time it happened, there was a sound, like pebbles or a light tap. We sort of laughed it off, assuming that it was a twig or grass moving in the wind, or perhaps a loose strap on the outside of the tent. I don't recall exactly how it happened at first, but I do remember we suddenly became silent at the same time. A sound came to be audible to the both of us, footsteps slowly moving towards our tent. We wondered if it was a bear or other non-human animal, but it seemed distinctly bipedal. They were moving slow and measured, like a step every 2 seconds. I finally said in a whisper, "Someone's coming." My friend didn't move. His face had an expression of fear. At some point, my friend bolted up and said, "Fuck this." He grabbed his pipe, stuffed it full of pot, and took the biggest, deepest drag I've ever seen a person take. About a minute or two later, he was out. Drugs aren't my thing, so I was alone in the tent as far as conscious bodies are concerned. I was sitting up at this point, and I had taken out the only weapon I had, a Swiss Army pocket knife. I took out the big and small blades, as well as the ice pick in the middle, and held it like some ridiculous melee weapon. I could see from the glowing embers in the fire pit through the sheer nylon material of our tent, and I was able to roughly, but barely, discern some of the rocks around it. I watched and listened intently. The footsteps came closer, and at the same slow pace. With each step, I could hear the dirt and rocks underfoot crunching and grinding. At some point, it was clear to me that whoever it was standing between the tent and the fire pit, from my fuzzy line of sight of the fire embers through the nylon tent, became obscured by something outside the tent. The footsteps stopped right at the front of the tent, about 6 to 8 inches, no more than a foot from the entrance of the tent. It was silent for about 1 minute, and then I heard a click. At exactly the same time, I clearly saw, through the nylon tent wall, a flashlight turn on. I was able to see not just the flashlight, but the outline of the hand holding it. The flashlight was shining on the zipper entrance into the tent, just inches from the zipper. Blood drained out of my head, and palms instantly became dripping in sweat. I yelled, "Who's there?" There was some fear in my voice, but it was mostly aggressive in tone. Whoever it was, the person immediately turned off their flashlight. I didn't move, but neither did they. The person just stood there, inches from the tent's only entrance. My friend is out, totally unaware of what's going on. Nevertheless, I pretend that he is still awake and whisper just loud enough to be audible to our visible. "Yes, it's loaded. There's one in the chamber." As if my friend was awake and asking about our gun. Fourth mistake. We didn't have a gun or any real weapon for self-defense. It felt like an eternity, but after sitting still for at least 10 minutes, I heard feet slowly turn in the dirt, then slowly walk away from the tent. I stayed up the whole night, and it wasn't until the lights of dawn came through the tent that I crashed out. The heat inside the tent woke us up, and it was near noon by that point. We went outside to inspect the site but found nothing missing. However, we did find boot prints leading away from our campsite and outside the campground. That was the last time I camped in a tent.